Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my always inquisitive and never uninspired host, Lance LaDuke. Lance, how are you today?
I'm trying to figure out why I'm not inspired.
No, I said never uninspired.
I'm just wondering.
So this is episode 123, and we are paying tribute to one of our dear friends, because today, if you are listening to this on the day that this is being released, is Sam Palafian's 70th birthday. Can you believe that?
It's kind of crazy. Sammy from Miami.
It is very sad that he's not still alive for many reasons, but I really wish that I could bust on him for being in his 70s. That would be
good. Yeah, he would appreciate that.
That would be fun. I'm reminded of my father, who actually he and Sam were good friends. But my father, when I turned 40, he was trying to bust on me about that. He said, "Boy, Drew," which is what my family calls him. He's like, "You're 40. You're getting a little long in the tooth there." And I said, "Dad, what sounds older, that you're 40 or that you have a kid who's 40?" And he said, "You win this one."
That's right.
Yep. Which and I reminded him I'll win that one every time. So yeah. So there's that. But I have procreated so that I can get the abuse in return. So
until your sister gets everything in the inheritance, then he wins the final one.
Yeah, well, there is that. She is nicer. I'm also reminded of a story with Sam, and then we're going to get to our quick announcements, and then we've got a lot of special guests today, which I think everybody's going to really love hearing their thoughts. But when 20 years ago, when I was in graduate school studying with Sam. So this was like 20 years ago, like tomorrow. This was, I think, the day after he turned 50, when Sam got locked out of his office. And this was at Arizona State, and I had a key to his office as the TA. And he came and knocked on my door, and he said, and he said, "Hitz, I need keys." And then I said, "What happened?" He said, "Oh, the door, the door closed, before I could grab it." And the door is at ASU. I mean, I used to like push it closed because it would literally take like 12 seconds to close. It was just really, really, really slow. And I said, and I said, "Oh, so what? You're in your 50s now, and now you can't even catch a door that takes 12 seconds to close?" And he said, "Fuck you, Hitz, give me the keys." So this was in front of like a freshman who was laughing hysterically, and Sam was laughing hysterically too. And I gave him my keys, and he actually brought them back. As soon as I said that, I was like, I might not get my keys back now. This was kind of dumb. So. Yeah, but anyway, so we are about to hear from this amazing cast of characters, from Jose Sibaja, Michael Sachs, J.D. Shaw, Patrick Sheridan, Mark Gould, and Marty Hackleman. And we could have filled this episode with like 150 famous brass players who could have shared their thoughts, but we just went with those 6. And I think people are going to really like this.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a hard thing to process still, and so I think the stories are one of the best ways to keep it rolling. So glad we got to do this.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's been just over 6 months, and I got like really sad, like, I don't know, 3 days ago, something, just kind of randomly, and I miss him all the time, but like I got like legit sad like 3 days ago, and still processing some stuff. So as many of us are. So So let's go from that super awkwardly into a plug. So why don't you tell us about the Papert people?
You can find out about all the wonderful programs and faculty at Duquesne University School of Music and the Mary Papert School of Music by clicking on the link in the show notes below. There's a bunch of really cool stuff going on and a bunch of really cool, awesome folks teaching on the faculty there. So thank you very much to them for being one of our longest sponsors. Longest term sponsors? How would you say that? Longest
tenured, long standing,
long
longshoreman.
Consistent, long standing. Yes. longboarding. Anyway, thank you very much for being supporters of the show. They saw the value of this early on, and we really, really appreciate it. And special thanks to Jim. Attaboy. Get back in there. Rub some dirt in it, Nova, for making it all possible.
Wanted to quickly tell you about Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies, then you will see that we have a ton of bonus materials for you available. In fact, we have monthly episodes of the Jacob's Quotes podcast, of the Music Practice Coach podcast, of the Performance and Pedagogy podcast, and the Deep Thoughts with Lance podcast. All of those are available exclusively for our Patreon patrons. So go ahead and head to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn more about that. And also coming up very soon, Sunday, November 3rd. So if you're listening to this the day this comes out, then this will be 10 days from now. Sunday, November 3rd at 9 p.m. Eastern, we are having a Patreon patron hang. Lance and I are going to be, I know, right? Are going to be on. We're going to have like a Zoom meeting, and we're going to be hanging with all of our Patreon patrons. So if you would like to join us, then just sign up and become a patron for as little as $1 an episode. And you get bonus episodes with every. I almost called them artists. Some of them are artists, and then there's the ones that are just our friends. But so that's November 3rd, and that link and all that info will be available. We'll shoot that out to our Patreon patrons right before that starts. And then the last plug is that we have a newsletter, which is brand new. If you go to pedalnotemedia.com/newsletter, then you can sign up for that newsletter, or the Entrepreneurial Musician newsletter, which is my other Pedal Note Media podcast, or the Modern Musicking podcast, or show rather, the newsletter there. So you can find all of that at pedalnotemedia.com/newsletter. All right. So we are gonna, the way that we did this was I figured out about a week ago maybe was when I pinged you and Will and said, like, wait a minute, not only is Sam's birthday coming up, but it's his 70th birthday. Mm-hmm. And we have been talking for 6 months about doing an episode like this, like a tribute to him, with people sharing their thoughts on his legacy. And the problem is that it is incredibly hard to get the likes of Jose Sibaja, Michael Sachs, J.D. Shaw, Patrick Sheridan, Mark Gould, and Marty Hackleman on the phone. And so what we figured out was going to work best was rather than having it be conversations, was just having them just record just some thoughts about Sam. And so I ended up scheduling with each of them and had them record a quick hit. And then Lance and I are going to talk now about what he meant to us. And then we're going to introduce the last half or so of this episode is going to be each of them sharing on it. And I think I have recorded, as we're sitting here recording this intro, I've recorded almost all of them, and boy, there's some really good stuff here. And we chose people that were really close to Sam, and we knew would be able to put into words well what he meant to them. But there's just like this huge hole in the universe that has not filled at all for me in the last 6 months, and I guess I'm starting to realize that it maybe never will fill, and so I'm kind of coming to terms with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard. I'm 10 years or so older than you. So it's a weird, way more of my mentors are going, and it's a strange thing to think about. And I think about, as I knew this was coming up, I was trying to think about the lasting, there's stories which are really, really fun, but from what are the ways in which my behavior has changed or my attitudes have changed was the thing that I was trying to sort of think about. And I come to things like just setting an incredibly high standard for yourself and those around you, for bringing an air of positivity to everything that you do, for bringing a notion of like anything is possible. You just got to put your head down and keep plugging away at it. These are in no particular order, but the notion that the art comes first, like everything. He was incredible. A very, very savvy business person. He was great negotiator. He was all that stuff, but it was all in service of the best possible art. Like, what is the best possible art you can make in this situation? because if you don't have that, then the rest of it is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's he's with, it sounds corny, but he's with me all the time. Every time I'm counseling a student or trying to encourage an ensemble to do better or trying to share a breathing gym concept or a brass gym concept, it's I'm taking him with me wherever I go.
Right. That sounds corny.
I know. Can't help it.
I wouldn't have thought that, but since you said, I know this sounds corny, I was just trying to agree with you, man. I was just trying to find common ground.
What are you going to do?
My wife actually made a homemade corn soup yesterday, as well as a killer tomato soup. So, yeah.
What's a killer tomato?
The
the movie.
Little Shop of Horrors. Yeah, there you go.
No, the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Did you ever see that?
No, I didn't. I know what you mean, but no, I did not. Yeah. I was too busy. I was too busy practicing, Lance.
You would have been 4 when this came out.
I was already practicing something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I wish Sam had just heard me say about why I didn't see a movie. I was too busy practicing. You are so full of shit hits. Yeah, that's probably what he would have just said. I'm realizing that we haven't said all of this like into these mics. I mean, we talked a little bit right after he passed, but I cannot begin to tell you what it was like, and a lot of us experienced this, but the number of people that reached out to me after he passed away, and I was quite public on Facebook about dealing with it, and that was just the way that I dealt with it. So I think that probably that wasn't a desired outcome, but I mean, I wasn't trying to make that happen, but I think that probably encouraged people. But there were just a lot of people who reached out and with their own anecdotes, and as you're going to hear at the very end of this episode, is going to feature the audio from my speech at his celebration of life down at Arizona State, which again, thank you to Heather Landis and all of the powers that be at Arizona State for hosting such a beautiful event. It was so appreciated and so needed for so many of us. But during almost at the end of that, I shared a bunch of quotes from Facebook posts, like as the news was coming out that he had passed, and one that really stuck out with me was like, I only met him twice, but he changed my entire conception of what a professional artist and teacher could be. It's like, holy crap, I mean, It's like, so no wonder there was so much of an outpouring when. Of course, he affected people like you and I who were just like obscenely lucky to spend just so much time with him. Mm-hmm. But it's much more remarkable how much of an impact he had on people that he just barely, I mean, and out of however many 30, 40, 50, 60, 69 years for people who are older than him of, parallel on Earth, is like, and their paths crossed for a total of like 4 hours. And he changed them fundamentally. I mean, that's like, that's just that. That's why there was such like an outpouring on all social media platforms when he passed, and that's why the New York Times came calling and did an obituary for a tuba player. That's what I wanted to say to the author when he first called. Like, he was a tuba player, right? It's like, holy crap! Like, this is. This is big time. So, but yeah, it was really cool hearing so many people share their stories, even when they didn't know him all that well, about how much of an impact that he had on them. Right. Powerful stuff.
Yep, that's the truth.
Yep. So we have decided, because Lance and I, we've realized that we both need another project, because we don't have enough projects going on, with like the teaching and the husbanding and the parenting and the pet owning and, the digital media company owning and everything else.
Modeling.
The what?
Modeling.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm a little worried. My hands are aging, so I'm not sure how much longer I can do the hand modeling thing. But that's why, the portfolio career, you got to have a lot of income streams so that
when you can do the before pictures.
That's I'm a professional hand model specializing in before pictures. That is funny.
That's pretty funny.
That is funny.
It's not bad.
And there are some people right now who are just here for Sam and to hear all these tributes, and like who like maybe cracked a little bit of a smile and then are like, wow, those dudes think that they're really funny. It's like, that's true.
Yeah. Guilty.
Guilty. Yes, exactly. So we are launching something called the Brass Legacy Project, and season 1 is going to feature Sam Palafian, and this is going to be another podcast which is going to be deep dive interviews with people, and we're going to do it by season. We don't really know yet how many episodes are going to be in a season. It's going to be very much in flux. But season 1, like I said, is going to be Sam. And so it's going to be deep dives with a lot of the people that you're hearing today, talking more at length about what Sam meant to them and how he's changed their playing, and like, some more stories and that kind of thing. And we've actually already got an idea for season 2 and season 3 of who that's going to be, although we're going to keep that under wraps. We don't yet have a time frame. I don't think there's any way it's going to launch in 2019, since we're about to be up against the end of the semester and then holidays. But it will launch in 2020. And you can visit brasslegacyproject.com for more details. But that should be pretty cool. And people when people get to talk about people that changed their lives fundamentally, it's like that tends to get extroverted people excited. That tends to get introverted people excited. That tends to get everybody excited. When you get to actually share how some other human impacted you is always a fun thing to talk about. So I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm hoping it provides some takeaways too for what goes into a legend like that. What are because we're going to hit it. I don't want to say at a surface level, but to really let it stretch out and hopefully draw some conclusions about what makes these artists great and lasting, and what can we learn from it is where I hope we end up going.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to draw the conclusion. We are no longer as impressed by Sam as we were before, because we figured out he just did these 2 things a little better than everybody else did. We'll distill it until we talk ourselves out of being sad, and then we won't be sad anymore. We've got a plan here, Lance.
Yep, that's called therapy.
No, what I just said is called hiding. So yeah, and that tends to be like it's like the opposite of therapy. It's therapy when you talk about other people's feelings. And not. No, I don't want to talk about myself. I want to talk about my partner. He's completely dysfunctional. So anyway, moving right along, really quickly wanted to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke Model euphonium mouthpiece.
Oh my God, that's so awesome.
You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Okay, so without further ado, let us get to the second half of this episode, and once again, we are going to hear short snippets from Jose Sibaja from Boston Brass, from the Cleveland Orchestra's Michael Sachs, from horn player extraordinaire J.D. Shaw, who it turns out all that he has to do on his Facebook status is just write Phantom Regiment or even just drum corps, and he gets 1,000 likes within an hour. It's like he's a powerful man. He's like a very powerful man. Patrick Sheridan, Mark Gould, and Marty Hackleman. So we're kind of people who Mark has known him for almost 50 years. People that played and worked with him extensively at the end of his career, the beginning and the middle. So we kind of tried to get a wide range here. And again, I just went with 6 names that popped into my head right away. There are so many people, and that's why we're going to do that deep dive in the Brass Legacy Project. Was like, how the hell do you ask 6 people to talk for 5 minutes and then call that your Sam Palafian tribute? It seemed like it was a little lacking, but we wanted to do a little taste and just to say happy birthday, Sammy from Miami. 70 years ago he entered this world, and I'm sure that the people at the hospital that day had no idea what they were delivering. So, because man, the impact that gentleman had is just astounding. So, speaking
probably human, I'm not exactly sure what this is.
And talk about professional segues to probably human, and still not clear what impact, good or bad, that they are having on the world. We are going to start off with tuba player extraordinaire Patrick Sheridan.
Well, it's been a little bit over 6 months since Sam's passed away, and I think one of the most amazing things, surprising things for myself has been the outpouring of care and concern for me since his passing. And it was surprising to me in the beginning, and since then it's been nice because it connects you with people. You check in. It's like a week after he passed away, I was talking to Mark Gould on the phone for like an hour and a half, and we just like howled laughing on the phone for the entire 90 minutes, recanting all the funny, hilarious Sam moments. They were much like the one that Jeff Kernow shared upon his passing about making that recording. And so it was those moments of people reaching out to me have been really therapeutic and have been nice to connect with some people from different parts of Sam's life, because he was, if you dealt with him for any period of time, he was a fairly compartmentalized human being. He was like, there would be certain things that would be going on, and then you'd find out about it a year or two later. It's like, well, I didn't even know that was going on. Oh, well, I was busy. We were busy doing other things. And he was a very compartmentalized human being. So that part of people reaching out because they knew that we had collaborated for so long has been really nice. It's been brought some people into my connections that I only knew about because Sam had talked about them, but we had never really met or had connected in any way. So that's been really cool. And the process of that made me reflect about how much we work together. In other words, my surprise at like, well, why is everybody worried about me? I'm fine. And so I looked at, the length of the relationship, and we knew each other for 41 years, and we worked together for 24 and traveled on the road, way over 7 years worth of time together. In those 24 years, we were traveling all over the place, and the variety of things that we did together on a collaborative basis were performance-based, were teaching-based, were writing, arranging, scoring, designing instruments, designing shows. It was really a variety of things across the board, as there are, if anybody that has ever studied with him or was friends with him would go, if you ever sort of supposed something or just wondered out loud, like how, or didn't have a quick answer for one of his queries, where he'd say, hey man, what are you working on today? And if you were like, or you looked up at all, it was like filled your mind with 1,000 things to do in the next minute. Like, oh, well, if you're not fucking around doing anything right now, then you should try these things. And that part of those conversations were what came up when I was thinking about all the time that we spent together. And that the one time really early on, I think I was still in high school, and we were chatting after an Empire show, and I was like, oh man, Leonard Bernstein is unbelievable. It's like nobody could ever be like that. And Sam, just short of slapping me verbally, he certainly did. Was like, hey man, that's just a complete musician. Stop glorifying what he did and just start chasing it. That was it. And I think I was 15 or 16 years old, and I was like, ooh, I just got yelled at by Sam Palafian the first 1,000 times, by the way. It was, but it was that moment where he's like, no, that's just a project, buddy. That's not talent. That's just, you should just go to work. He was just a complete musician. And every one of those things that he was doing, whether it was conducting that fed the teaching, or teaching that fed the writing, or writing that fed the creative, all of the things were cross-training for the other things. And then, so that's a side story. That's was really the essence of our relationship, though. In other words, was a constant sitting in the car or in an airplane or in between on a break, teaching somewhere or playing somewhere at the intermission, or right before the show, or right after the show, frequently after the show, driving to the next venue. And he would like, oh, we should try this tomorrow night, or we should do this, or how about if we do this, or let's change the bridge of this and put this chord in. And always one more little layer of things to be thinking about. But then there was he was writing a Harry Potter story over the course of the 24 years that we worked together, because then all of a sudden something that I had done as a project or as an idea, or that bridge or that chord, it would show up in a marching band show, or it would show up later in this arrangement. I go, hey, man, you're doing that chord thing again. He's like, hey, man, you can finally hear now. And so it's this like a older brother, younger brother relationship, but it was always project-based in terms of like trying to aspire to be able to become the things that we both looked up to, when we both really looked up to Leonard Bernstein. But it was really about trying to be able to do those things, be a great teacher, be a great conductor, be a great leader, be a good creative, always have things to do that are a variety of things, which are, in terms of running a business, keep you diversified, keeps your brain doing the right thing. So I'm really happy that people have been concerned for me and reaching out, because the connection has been wonderful. But for me, the celebration of this is that I got equipped, and so did you, and so did Lance. So many of us got equipped by him. We didn't know that that's what was happening when it was happening, but that's what we got. We got armed with all his information, and we know how to use it. And so that's the honoring, and that's the pleasure of it. Really, it's that I get to go do that. You know, Michelle, my wife, she was like, the first day that I was going to go teach breathing, she's like, how's this going to go? And I'm like, it's going to go great. What are you talking about? I said, not only that, I said, but it's so habit. I said, that's going to sort of bound any sort of grief that might pour forth if that happens. And if it does, oh well. And but it was probably one of the more fun times I've had in recent memory of teaching the breathing, because it was infused with this idea of like, okay, well, I've been telling Sam stories my whole life, and now I'm going to tell them for the rest of my life, so that people can carry them on, just like we've been talking about Arnold Jacobs or all of the other really great heroes that have helped develop us that are no longer here. So that's been the fun. It's really fun to teach breathing. It's really fun to get up in front of a group and lead a jazz tune and think about the tools that Sam gave me for doing that. It's fun to sit down and write a new piece of music. I just finished doing a transcription of the Washington Post March, and I thought for every measure of that, all 108 of them, like all of the conversations I had with Sam about Fred Fennell and marches and how to stylize them, how the lost performance art of march style is gone, and how it's up to us to continue to teach it and demand it and not gloss over it. And so, yeah, there have been moments of great grief in the last 6 months, but for the most part, it's been an upward tick of joy and connection, because I feel like, man, I've just given so much, so better do the same, better leave it behind. So yeah, it's been cool. And like really interesting to be on the phone with some people and then share some stories, have a good laugh, and then hear something that I hadn't heard before, or hear another layer, or hear another person's version of what happened that day, to whomever at whichever tuba conference with whatever body tape was laying on the ground after that. Like some of those things that have cropped up, and it just created just like these hysterical moments. And so yeah, I miss him, but it's like I get to see him every day in the words that come out of my mouth and the notes that come out of my bell.
Next up is Sam's former colleague from Empire Brass, renowned horn player Marty Hackleman.
Sam Palafian, a force of nature on a good day. I can't say I know any specific little anecdote or story about Sam Palafian, because any time he was in the room, in a rehearsal, in a concert, in the world, when I was with him, he made a difference. He controlled the situation personally, business-wise, musically, on a very subtle level. He didn't ever fight. He was a positive, passive, aggressive. And when I knew him all those years in the Empire Brass, that was a capital letter to dealing with Rolf. And so when we had to deal with things musically and personally and business-wise, Sam was this unctuous oil of wisdom that seemed to just make things happen, keep things working, keep things from blowing up, keep things from burning up. But the most thing I remember from him is in concerts, sometimes in rehearsals, of course, but in concerts, nobody brought the heat, nobody brought the intensity, nobody brought the consistency like Sam Palafian. Not just as a tuba player extraordinary, which he was, but as a musician extraordinary. His rhythm, his tone, when he had a solo, it was always at 110%. I never remember anything remotely smelly of punting and dialing it in. That just was not in his vocabulary. It wasn't in his soul. He couldn't do it if he tried. And there's many stories about him, of course, doing that. And I just didn't know it about it when I joined the group. I knew he was an awesome tuba player. But as I got to live with him, I just found an extraordinary person, musician, that you could count on also, too, on personal levels. I mean, we had many heart-to-hearts because there was times when, while Rolf didn't ever really attack me, I was wounded by the offenses that he threw at Sam and other people. And yet and he said, don't worry about it. It's okay. We all just let it roll off our back, you know. And they did to some degree. But he was this mitigating force of keeping everything working. The wisdom, the knowledge, the heart, believing in the music, believing in what we were really doing was extraordinary. And I can't say I've ever met anything like Sam. Even in the end, when we were working with the Empire Brass or the All-Star Brass, producing records and helping with rehearsals and his arrangements that he did, this inevitable Sam, it was like, wow, we couldn't do this without you. And there's many things we'll have to do without Sam, but it won't be easy. Love you, Sam.
Next up is horn player and longtime collaborator with Sam on many fronts, J.D. Shaw.
So in coming up with memories for Sam Palafian, it's really hard to just come down to just a few. There were so many experiences together that we did. So we shared a love of, I think, three things. And the first of those just being on stage and performing and playing brass instruments. The next one was teaching, and we talked a lot about pedagogy and how kids learned and what they were learning and the how and the why, and that we would pretty much geek out pretty hard on that stuff. But the third one was food. We shared a love of great food, and many years ago, we were doing this thing called the Palafian Shaw Project, which was an initiative by the Las Vegas youth orchestras to recruit more brass players. And so they started a summer camp in Las Vegas for middle and high school kids. But it had a performance element of it as well. And Sam and I put together a group that we called Cones of Fury. And I think it came out shortly after the Blades of Fury movie with Will Ferrell. And but we created this little chamber ensemble that was tuba, horn, piano, drums, and because we needed probably something nerdier than us, we added an accordion player who also played banjo. And so it's this funky little ensemble. We had a great time with that, creating music with this ensemble, from everything from Bach to Piazzolla to more sophisticated stuff. But we got that together for the opening of I think it was called the Smith Center, which was a new performing arts center there in Las Vegas, and that we were opening their chamber music hall. And so we did that like one of the first nights of the camp that we did in Las Vegas. And then the rest of the time was teaching these students, and we would do lots of breathing in the morning, and then kind of a master class brass techniques time, and then they would all get into chamber music, and we would coach all the chamber ensembles, and it was just a lot of fun to work with Sam on those things. It was great because you would see Sam give the same amount of attention to some sixth grader who'd been playing for just a year as well as the high schooler that was the first year All-State player. And I think the thing that was really neat was that everybody mattered to Sam. He just really had a connection with people, and so we would teach all week, and that was a lot of fun. But we were usually done about 2 or 3 o'clock during the day, and at night we would call up all these restaurants in Las Vegas, and we would ask for tables. A lot of restaurants in Vegas will have a table that sits in the kitchen, and the chef will sit there and talk to you and talk about his food. And they usually and it was really a performance element for them as well, because they had two very hungry audience members that were watching them, and so we would go into Gordon Ramsay's place. We would go into Todd English's place, and we would always talk about food. But it was really interesting how food and music were not that far apart. It was both a passion, and how we talked about music very often was metaphorical to how we talked about food, and vice versa. And I remember one time we were in the middle of Virginia, and we went to a barbecue place, and he had these cousins that lived there, and these cousins come to lunch with us, and next thing I know is the cousins keep like giving him food and putting it on his plate, or just presenting him with food. It was almost ceremonial. And he was telling me that Armenian families, it's all about the head of the household, and everybody gives him a little bit of food and everything. And so it was almost kind of like this mafia boss being given his vig or something like that. And he would talk about his upbringing in Miami and in this Armenian family, and his dad was a lawyer, and from what it sounds like, a lawyer to some very shady characters. But it was always interesting how he would just connect with people, whether it was his cousins like that, or his family, or when we were talking to these chefs in the restaurants. It was always a great experience. And then teaching wise, in 2003. Not long after all the breathing gym stuff came out, I had him and Pat Sheridan in when I was teaching Phantom Regiment, and started working a lot of those concepts. I'd always worked on breathing with the porn line at Phantom Regiment, but here's something that codified a little bit more, and not just a concept of what we were doing, but how and why and what the physiology of it was. And so he would come out to the drum corps, and he'd never really been around that kind of environment, and quickly became just enamored with the dedication and the work ethic of the members, and to the point where he and Pat were kind of following us around, following the corps around the summer. And it was neat just to see him come alive and what the possibilities were for 80 brass players on the field to be fueled by their pedagogy, and I started working a lot of that into my pedagogy, and kind of altering it a little bit for what we do. And he was always extremely open. Where I was like, well, have you thought about doing it this way so that it can align with what they're doing visually, or what they're doing, whatever they're doing? And he was always very open into whatever could be the next step. I think it was cool that the breathing gym wasn't the final thing. It kept evolving, and it kept moving into different things. We kept seeing different possibilities for it throughout, whether it was a sixth grader, or where it was the end of the season in drum corps, or a symphony player. And so there was, I think the thing that kind of that you get with Sam is there's nothing he's not interested in, whether it's a person or whether it's the news or whether it's food or anything. He was just extremely interested in everything, and I think that was how he really connected with people was because he would make you feel like you were the most important thing in the world at that moment, and to him you really were. It wasn't put on. It wasn't fake. And with all those things, I think every single person he came into contact with probably felt like he was their best friend, and that made him a better teacher and made him a better performer. And it was just I'm very humbled that I could call him a friend, and I miss him every day, and I think about him every day. And I guess the final thing I could say with his birthday. Happy birthday, Sam. Happy 70th birthday. I wish you were still here.
Up next, we have Sam's colleague from Boston Brass, lead trumpet player Jose Sibaja.
Hi, this is Jose Sibaja, and I was approached by Andrew Hitz to talk a little bit about Sam. Of course, you all know Sam, and Sam was a superhero for most of us. But what was incredible about Sam, it was that he was always curious. Sam was that person in the room that we used to call Sam a walking Google. But still, he was the one that would answer, that would ask the biggest amount of questions, that he was still curious all the time. And was always learning, non-stop learning. It was incredible being around him in so many ways. Personally, one of the kindest people you will ever meet, brilliant human being, and the ultimate mentor, the ultimate teacher, and of course, a giant of the tuba. I was lucky enough to share very closely the last 7 years of his life with Sam, and I don't think I'll ever recover from losing Sam in so many ways. It's an honor to be here speaking about him, and I want to thank Lance and Andrew that took the initiative to do this and that asked me to talk about him. Another incredible thing about Sam, it was that there was never, ever a time when he would start anything with a negative comment. Any feedback to a student, any feedback to anybody with a negative comment. Sam would always find a positive comment, and then he would build up from there to try to share light or help everybody around him. I believe that there is, everybody that got to meet Sam in a deep way or in a different level. I believe that everybody has life before Sam and life after Sam, because he meant so much for so many of us, and he influenced so many of us in such a positive way that there is no way that you were going to live your life the same way. Whenever you met Sam and you interacted with Sam and you had business with Sam, or you were taught by Sam. Some of the most incredible musical moments of my life were during those 7 years that I got to share the stage with Sam Pilafian. And some of the funniest moments of my life too, because Sam was an incredible humorist. He loved to laugh as much as I do, so we did get into some trouble together. He loved traveling. I think that his most precious trip that we took with Boston Brass was when he went to Japan, and he was so proud to be in Japan after 20-something years of not being in Japan. And one of the greatest things was to see how people welcome Sam and receive Sam like he deserved to be received and welcome as a giant of the tuba, as a guru, and as a hero. Again, I could talk all day about Sam, but I know there's some other people talking, and I just want to share a little bit of my experiences with Sam. Thank you again. And again, Sam, there's no way we will ever stop missing you. You're the best.
Next, we have one of Sam's best friends for almost the last 50 years, former principal trumpet of the Metropolitan Opera, Mark Gould.
Sam Palafian. Now, a lot of the people who are speaking about Sam Palafian, they knew him for a shorter time than I knew him. Like when Jose Sabah talks to me about Sam, this is when he was in Boston Brass. He was already like 60 years old when he joined Boston Brass. Now, I met Sam in 1972, 72 or 73, I think 72. We were both actually enjoying the favors of the same woman. And that's how we found out about each other. This was in different cities. It was like traveling, doing a gig. And this woman said, you remind me exactly of Sam Palafian. I said, oh, that's fun. I said, Sam Palafian, yeah, I know him. And she told me, blah, blah, blah. So then shortly thereafter that, I met Sam, and we had a good laugh about that. And I don't know where the woman is, but Sam and I remained very close friends. And we've done a lot of projects, all kinds of projects. We made 3 albums for EMI, Main Street Band. We did, we had this group Extempore, and Extempore was like a freely improvised group with Cooper Moore, Gene Ashton. We had the Michael Urbaniak and Ursula did like these free Polish musicians, a violinist, and and Ursula sang, but no words, just in sounds. And we had Kenwood Dinar, the great drummer, was playing drums, and we did stuff like that. And he played. I'm getting to the story. I was thinking about any story I could tell about Sam. That's not censored. Like we did a lot of carousing. This is when we're young. We're very young. We're in our 20s. And we played at the Waterloo Music Festival together. I mean, we go back. Oh, my goodness. All that as young men, as young, wild, fairly successful at a young age musicians. So we had a good time. Now, we played, Sam played in the New York Trumpet Ensemble. We made a record called Trumpets in Stride. It's a wonderful record. I really love this record. We made it for Summit Records, and it's with Sam played tuba. I played trumpet with Marvin Stamm, Chris Gecker, David Bilger, Tom Bontrager. That was the trumpets. And it was all traditional jazz stuff. And Sam was the tuba player. And Mark Shane was the pianist. And we did this. So anyway, we were doing a gig with this group without Mark Shane. We were playing with Frank Vignola, who he played with Traveling Light, that Frank Vignola. So Frank Vignola was on the gig. So we're up at the Vermont Mozart Festival, and we're at Robert Frost Cottage. We're at Robert Frost Cottage, and we're doing this gig. We're playing Trumpets in Stride. We're doing this stuff. And also on this gig, it wasn't Marvin Stamm, it was Byron Stripling, who was on the gig with, who was up there, I think. Jim Pandolfi played it. That's right. Jim Pandolfi played on this. Rich Kelly was there. I'm trying to remember. I think Wayne Dumaine played on this gig. In any case, we're playing this gig, and just before the gig, Sam says, let's take a walk. We need to take a walk over here. Now, Robert Frost Cottage is like in a big field, it's a beautiful field, and then there's another field. It's like a little hill, little incline, and over this hill, there's another field, and then there's another hill and another field. So we started to take a walk. We're going to get focused, as it were, me, Sammy, and Frank. So what happens is, we're hanging, and then we look at the time, we're getting focused. And then we look at the time and we go like, oh, no, this is terrible. We have to hit in 2 minutes. And we're standing in the middle of the field focused. We're in the middle of the field focused, and we're thinking like, where is the gig? We're sort of in the middle of Vermont, 2 minutes before the downbeat, stoned out of our minds, trying to find the stage of this gig. So we're moving around, and it's like a big crowd, but we can't see it because we go over the wrong hill. So we show up to the downbeat. Probably about 6 minutes late. The three of us walk in. The Mel Kaplan, who was running the festival, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. He was ready to kill me because it was my gig, But anyway, the gig, it was it was actually one of the best gigs we ever played. It was a wonderful gig, probably about 1,000 people there. It was a great gig. Playing with Sam always was really, really fun. The thing I love more about it than anything, aside from the stupendous playing, he had a time feel like a great bass player. And there are very few tuba players who you could say that about. And he was like that. And Sammy, I'm thinking about him all the time. I miss the son of a bitch. All right, I'm done, man.
Up next, principal trumpet of the Cleveland Orchestra, Michael Sachs.
So I first met Sam Palafian in summer of 1981. I was lucky enough to do the Empire Brass Quintet Symposium at Tanglewood. So I spent 4 weeks listening to the Empire Brass, going to Boston Symphony concerts, etc. I'm really enjoying Tanglewood. But the greatest thing about it was that I was put in a quintet, and Sam became my coach. And I had never met Sam before. But immediately, Sam's whole vibe, just, his intensive positivity was just infectious everywhere. And, not to mention getting to hear him every day, either sitting in my group or playing with the Empire Brass was just awe-inspiring. I'd never heard anyone on a brass instrument, let alone a tuba, doing the types of musical things he was doing, the dexterity, the finesse, the power. Really, just the musicality was just absolutely stunning. But really, with Sam for me is, my relationship with Sam was very, very special for the 38 years that we knew each other. And in many ways, I owe Sam everything that I've been doing ever since and the career that I have. And the reason being is that while he was working with me in the quintet, he was super, positive and upbeat and supportive of what I was doing. And I was at a crossroads. I was 19. I wasn't sure if I was going to go into music or I was going to go to business school or law school and take over my dad's ad agency business, which is really what my dad wanted me to do. But, I was really torn. I wanted to play the trumpet, and Sam was just, all in with it, telling me, look, you've got what it takes. You've got, all the talent, all the stuff. You've got the drive. You really should do this. And then he kept saying, I got this buddy of mine, Mark Gould. He plays principal trumpet in the Met. And you guys would love each other. I got to hook you up with Gould. This would be great. And then, he knew that I was going to go down to the city and hang out with my cousin for a couple weeks. It just so happened that Gould came up to Tanglewood my third week or so there to visit Sam or do something else. I don't know. But the word was he was there to visit Sam. Anyhow, Gould came to one of the sessions, and when Sam was coaching the quintet, and I met Gould, liked my playing, we decided that, get together. Of course, Sam was just like, yeah, man, you guys got to get together. Gould, this guy's great. And, Sachs, man, you got to hang with Gould. He's like, he's the guy you need to be with. He's going to, be able to give you, the manner of doing this that you're going to need and be able to really kind of, finish off your training in the best way possible and really extend what you've been doing, et cetera. Anyhow, So I go down the city. I take one lesson with Gould. One lesson turns into 3 over those 2 weeks. And Gould is the reason that I wanted to go back to New York and study with him. And it just changed my whole trajectory, that entire, sequence of getting to know Sam and Sam really putting Gould and I together. So, really without Gould, without Sam, I wouldn't be here where I am today, enjoying the career that I've had. And then ever since, I saw Sam, many, many times over the years. Sometimes it'd be a few years in between. Other times I'd be lucky enough to do projects with him. He did a couple projects, a ragtime project and a Sousa band project with Gould that I played on, which was hysterical because I got to hang out with them and they were unbelievable. I mean, really in many ways, Gould and Palafian were like my 2 older brothers. And when I was younger, when I was 19, 20, 21, I just idolized these guys. I mean, Sam was just bigger than life. And then to get to work with him, to get to become friends with him, and really become, pretty close with him over the years, really just meant the world to me. I mean, every interaction was always, super positive and inspiring and thought-provoking. And, it just, again, I see people using the word positivity and infectious, that he just took over. Just everything was possible with Sam. And brainstorming with him, whether it was in New York or Miami or recently up in Colorado at my festival in Steamboat, where I was lucky enough to have him come up a couple years, just the last couple of years, right prior to, when he really got sick and unfortunately couldn't come back out this summer. But, getting to hear him play and getting to just be around him in his presence was just always so wonderful. And, whenever I think of Sam, I just get this big grin on my face, and it just, kind of lights me up still just thinking about his presence. So, even though he's missed in a physical manner and just, being able to talk with him, to be with him or hear him play, he's so much within me, and, something that I really want to carry on and carry forward, really in everything that I do, from here on.
We are just about at the end of this special birthday tribute to Sam Palafian. Thank you to all of the incredibly busy people who joined us to share a thought or two about how special Sam was to all of us. Thank you to all of you for listening, and also I wanted to thank Diane Palafian for asking me to speak at Sam's Celebration of Life back in May, which you are about to hear the audio of. As you can hear in this, I had a very hard time with this. This was the most difficult thing I have ever had to do from a stage, and I have spent a lot of time on stage in a lot of capacities, and everything's pretty normal at this point. This was really, really difficult, as it was for all of us who had the privilege of speaking, and I just really thank Diane for giving me the opportunity to be able to share some thoughts about my mentor, Sam Palafian. So Sam, happy 70th birthday. We all miss you like hell, and we're all better for having known you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Hitz, and Sam was like a second father to me, and I'm not going to cry. So I'm just telling you that now so that I follow through on my word. So I wanted to first thank the amazing, incredible Diane Palafian for asking me. She knows that I'm very shy, so she actually asked me to speak for at least 10 minutes. No, that's very much not true. She put in all caps, "Would you please share a few words about Sam?" Because she knows I'm a windbag and that I can talk about Sam for hours. So if I don't talk for longer than 10 minutes, you have Diane to thank. And also I wanted to give my love to Alex, who I'm sure is watching the stream over in Tenerife. I love you, brother, and I really can't wait to see you later this summer. Never meet your heroes, they say. I'm not sure where I first heard those words, but they say you'll be disappointed if you actually get to know them. It's better to keep your idealized vision of them from a distance. I don't know who first uttered those words, but they sure as hell weren't talking about Sam Palafian. On a hot July morning in 1988, I got to do just that and meet my hero. I was still a few weeks shy of becoming a teenager, and the Empire Brass had just blown my mind with an intimate performance in Tanglewood. My parents encouraged me to go up to Sam afterwards and introduce myself. I was scared as hell, but really just wanted to shake his hands. Maybe if I got just a little closer to him, I could figure out how he was able to play the tuba with that much personality. I'd never heard anything like it. My mother actually snapped a photograph just moments before the encounter that would change my life forever. My back is to the camera, my shoulders are slouched, and I'm looking up at him with complete amazement. For the record, he was wearing robin egg blue pants and totally rocking them. I can't make this up. He could have just looked at me and said, "Thanks for coming," and immediately moved on to the next person, and I would have cherished that moment forever. But I was about to meet Sam Palafian, so you know that's not what happened. He spoke to me and even looked at me in a way that I'll never forget. It was like we already knew each other. Like I, some random gobsmacked kid, was destined for greatness just like him. He seems excited to meet me as I was to meet him. I suddenly felt like I had a friend who happened to be a tuba god. And because of how he spoke to me that day, I didn't think, he wasn't here, I knew here that I could play in a group just like Empire Brass someday. That's the kind of gift that parents would pay just about anything to give their kids at that age or any age, and he gave that gift to me just because he could. That was Sam. If Sam never accomplished anything in his career except playing the tuba, he would still be lauded appropriately as a legend. The guy played with Pink Floyd, Lionel Hampton, and the Metropolitan Opera. That's the absolute pinnacle of the rock, jazz, and classical worlds. No one in the history of the tuba has ever had that kind of career. But it wasn't just his versatility. When he was playing in the Dixie Band, he sounded like Kirk Joseph or Matt Perrine, someone who had been gigging in New Orleans their entire life. When he played the back of an orchestra, he sounded like Chester Schmitz or Gene Picorni, someone who had been sitting back there full-time for decades. I once saw him play a free jazz gig at a sleepy bed and breakfast in the Berkshires on a Sunday morning. This gig was like way out there. Like at one point he took his mouthpiece out, he turned it around and he plugged it in backwards and then started like chanting through the stem of the mouthpiece. And it was all like, yeah, it was very, very funny. It was all people that were probably at like the James Taylor concert the night before at Tanglewood, and now my teacher was chanting through it, and it was awesome. But again, he sounded like a full-time experimental jazz musician from New York City or Berlin. And he was, of course, the greatest brass quintet player, tuba player to ever live. And if anyone disagrees with me, I will fist fight you in the courtyard after the service. But seriously, he wrote the book on how to hold down the low end of a chamber ensemble. Like Misha Schneider, the Budapest String Quartet, or Bootsy Collins, the Funkadelic, Sam was the glue, the swagger, the style, the drive that made Empire Brass so magical. I'm in awe of the legacy he left, and for the rest of us who followed in his footsteps. People like William and I, all we got to do is just copy what he did, and we get the job done. It's that simple. My question is this: how can any musician always sound like they are playing the exact style of music they were put on this earth to perform? If you can play any one style as well as Sam played all of them, you will have no problems paying your bills as a musician. And yet he did it all. He was a musical chameleon, the likes of which this world rarely ever sees on any instrument. And he was a tuba player. We in the tuba world got to claim him as our own, a true musician's musician, equal parts inspiring and mystifying. Then there was Sam the teacher, a master pedagogue. His ability to push students out of their comfort zone while simultaneously making us feel safe and supported was the essence of his teaching. There's a reason why so many people who only spent a master class or two with him still feel such a strong connection with him to this day. He had an unwavering passion for teaching that permeated every encounter he ever had with a student, no matter how brief. That always present passion was contagious, and it ignited something in you when you were around it. As with all great teachers, he always taught the student in front of him. But he was next level. It wasn't just the student, but whatever version of that student happened to walk into his room that day. We all strive for that, but it is hard to pull off 100% of the time. He just always seemed to know exactly what to say and when to say it. I have to share one story, which happened just one floor above us here. And I'm going to have to pause at one point, like Sam did, because in his opening remarks, so that I can keep the YouTube stream G-rated. But Sam, I played the tuba solo in the Prelude to Demeisterson. Now I say it's a solo. It turns out that like every person in the orchestra except for like the first oboe and like the first violins is playing along with us, but we still call it our solo. And it goes up kind of high, and then there's like this trill at the top of the staff, and anyway, I played it for him, and it did not go as planned, and in particular, it was the high part sounded like I was like falling down a flight of stairs. So he told me, he had his back to me, he was like, moving papers around on his desk, and he said, Hitz, he said, what you need to do is you just need to play this up an octave, and if you keep the same Wagner sound, the same Wagner weight, the same Wagner articulation, you play it up an octave, then you bring it back down, and it's it's nice and low, and that, I mean, like, and so I was, keep in mind, I've known him for a very, very long time. He's like a second father to me, and so I was apparently feeling feisty that day because I said, man, you can't do that. And you know where the story is going. So Sam had his back to me, and he froze, and like I couldn't even see his face, but instantly I had flicked the Sammy from Miami switch, and it was like, and he was trying to decide, like, do I play it for him and prove him wrong, or do I end this kid's life? And he turned around, and he didn't even look at me as if I wasn't there. He walked with anger for the 12 feet to his tuba. He picked it up. He didn't even sit down. While standing up, he stared at the bridge of my nose, and without blinking, and it sounded like Wagner up an octave, and it went up to 2 E's above the staff. He ripped a lip trill on the A above the staff, perfect release, and then he pulled the horn off of his face. This is where I'm going to have to clean things up. And he gave me a salute. We'll just say that he said I was number one. And without a hint of a smile, he said, "You." And my reaction, I went, "Yes!" And he's looking, he's not smiling yet. And I was like, "This is the greatest moment of my life." And he's still not smiling, and then I was like, "That's the most amazing thing I've ever heard." And then he finally cracks a smile, and he said, "What the is wrong with you, Hitz?" And I was like, "Do you realize that you have not encouraged me? You have mandated that I talk to you this way. That's one of the greatest things that I have ever seen in the history of my life." And then he just shook his head and smiled, and then I went and practiced it. And I'd love to tell you that I was able to do that the following week, but that would be a lie. So that was Sam. So Sam was also an incredible entrepreneur. He was, of course, one of the founding members of the Empire Brass, that we've already heard so much about, one of the most successful brass groups of all time, and I mean both artistically and financially. He founded Traveling Light with Frank Mignola. They were so good, he made the world realize that we had been lacking a completely smoking tuba guitar duo the entire time, and we just never knew it. With his main partner in crime, Pat Sheridan, they turned decades of breathing teachings into a wildly successful line of products called the Breathing Gym, and then the Brass Gym, and it continues on to this day. He was the consummate example of a musical entrepreneur long before every school of music in the country started throwing the term around. In fact, I never once heard him utter the term entrepreneur or the word entrepreneur while I was studying with him. He didn't talk about it. He showed me. That's the best possible teaching. He was also cutting edge. He was always cutting edge no matter what he did. As a player, as a teacher, and as a businessman, he always led by example. I could stand up here until Tuesday listing the incredible things he achieved in his career, but I think what sums up the unbelievable impact that Sam had on the world best is that there are literally hundreds of people who could be standing up here today delivering a tribute to him. And I don't just mean people who looked up to him as a musician and an artist. I mean people who he fundamentally changed as humans. Those people posted tributes on social media from all over the world as soon as news spread that Sam had passed. Here's a small sampling of those tributes. I miss him already, met him literally twice, changed my playing and my life. Even more than anything, he taught me about tuba playing or music. He was a model of positivity, passion, purpose, and a can-do attitude. The world is forever different because he was in it, a true giant of a human being and a musician. He epitomized everything that music means to this world. The world was a better place because of you, your passion, your teaching, your commitment to your art, and just your talent to lift and inspire anyone who was around you. You are a special soul, and your legacy lives on. He taught me not just to play, but to play with enthusiasm and passion. But he was more than a teacher. He was a friend, a mentor, even a makeshift therapist during some of my most confused days of youth. Having only met you twice, I can say that you fully redirected my belief of what a consummate professional and musician should be. There were so many like that. This person only met him twice, and it fully redirected their belief of what a consummate professional and musician should be. And the impact of this man on so many of us is just astounding. Just a couple more. Never has anyone influenced or impacted my direction as a young musician more than he. The world just lost one of the most genuine, amazing, and generous human beings ever, and we are all better people for having known him. So the next time someone tells you you shouldn't meet your heroes, tell them about Sam Palafian. And rest assured, if you didn't ever have the privilege of meeting him in person, he would have made you feel special too, just like he did for me as that awkward kid at Tanglewood over 30 years ago. That's just what he did. That was Sam. Rest easy, Sam. You left the world a far better place, and we're all better for having known you. Yeah, man.